forced to do in order to accommodate the double bottlenecks that I've discussed in previous episodes. So I will just say, know about it, what we talked about, because we brought it up umpteen times. The thing is that if they do that, now they have to deal with how far back the Berriman goes. And again, as we go into in the Berrimanology chapter, that was so much fun writing, because you would see at any possible example that they would bring up, you could, as you started to furrow back through the data.
Exactly.
Yeah. Unless you invoke the cognitum.
Well, you're right that there should be a clear dividing line. It's not that every single organism could have its own separate genetic code. They could have different amino acids. Some could. I'm going to make everything in a nested hierarchy because reasons.
Yeah, and make sure that serine is absolutely uniform across all organisms, but leucine isn't.
Yeah, it just makes you wonder. It's almost as though it's not designed,
that it's evolved over time. And so that we're trying to pull together. One of the objects that we had in doing this book was to pull together the enormous amount of information that between the two of us we knew of, and the still bigger amount of information that we weren't even aware of until we really started diving into a lot of these issues, and then coalesce them. So someone asked about how thick the bloody book was, and whether and we had to cut stuff out. We had to pull ourselves in at periodic points of going,
oh yeah,
I'd love to digress on that point, but my God, this thing is getting big enough already.
The Cambrian, we basically jumped the whole Cambrian explosion because we basically relegated it to a single little footnote where we're like, we would love to
go off to Irwin and Valentine and all that. Yeah. And I would have loved to have gone into more origins or bust on the origin of life stuff, and that, even though it's still an open question, it's still so much work has been done. We just kind of hinted at some of that material in the course of the book. But anyway, back to Michael Behe. Now, I have described intelligent design as creationism light, and nowhere does that show up more here. Compared to the relatively long posting at AIG, it's barely beyond a page. And it's evolution, design, and COVID-19, where he has no relevant technical sources at all. He's got a thing to basically a discussion of host adaptation and its constraints on virus evolution. New paper in 2019. You can find the link to that in there, but and some stuff in assortment of microbiology issues. But the meat of it has to do with what he thinks about COVID as designed. So, do I think viruses were designed? Yes, I most certainly do. The viruses of which we are aware, including the coronaviruses, Ebola, and HIV, are exquisitely, purposefully arranged, which is the clear signature of intelligent design. Well, then does that not mean the designer is evil and wants people to suffer? No, not necessarily. I'm a biochemist, not a philosopher. Nonetheless, I see no reason why a designer, even of such things as viruses, should be classified as bad on that basis alone. At which point he puts up an example, which is storms. That storms arise. Oceans are good and wonderful and have fish and so forth, but storms can happen once in a while, and that's bad, but that doesn't mean that things weren't. But the problem is, this is a terrible analogy.
Yeah,
because
pretty bad.
If it were like it, we would say, it's like saying when you walk next to that avalanches occur in the mountains. And if you happen to be under where the avalanche is, that's bad for you, but avalanches aren't nasty per se. But avalanches do not breed. Avalanches do not replicate. Storms do not replicate in that way. It would be like saying that a storm can replicate and find a host where it attaches to your body and generates more storms inside of your body. And then when that's done, it surreptitiously waits until you get within 6 feet of another person so that it can pass on and make more storms. And the effect of the storm is that a certain portion of them, especially the little old grannies, are going to drop dead over time. That's a little more complicated an issue than storms.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but that was plain outright stupid.
He did exactly the same stupid analogy, not that storm example. He had a different stupid analogy in regards to the Darwin black box thing. And I discussed it in Creationism Light, which you can find at the TIP website. But by all means, download my crap. You got time on your hands because you're all at home having to be socially separate. Download some of these things and plow through them. But anyway, his argument there was that you don't always give a child the complicated, perfect toy. This was his argument against imperfection.
But is the toy going to kill the child?
Exactly. This is like, as I put it in the book, that chapter, it's as if you were giving a child a toy that had really sharp edges that would slice their fingers off. That's the kind of toys we're talking about. And so he has a terrible trouble dealing with what I described in that chapter as the Titanic iceberg problem, because the iceberg is just an iceberg. It has no intentions. It has no purposes. It had a long 20,000, 30,000 year old history when the snow was first falling on the Greenland ice sheet and eventually turns into a block that fissions off around before the keel of the Titanic was even laid. And eventually just happened to be in just the right spot for stupid captain to slam into it in 1912. Meanwhile, the Titanic is an object of design. And therefore, everything about it can be judged on a moral value. In other words, you can say, why weren't there enough lifeboats? Why didn't you have enough binoculars? Why didn't you make the rivets better? Why didn't you make sure the first class people weren't the first off? Why didn't this? Why didn't that? Now, everything about that is fair game. And the designer crowd don't want to have to play that game any more than the creationists want to figure out how many speciation events there have been during a Berriman. And so they just turn into lame analogies like this. So I go patooey on both AIG and VHE, but it gets worse because right coincidental to all of this little mess, I happened to see a posting, which again I put up from Raw Story. Man dies and his wife is in critical condition after ingesting drug touted by Trump as a coronavirus treatment.
Yep.
Oh, Christ. What?
Yeah. What?
Yeah, that's our
indeed.
president.
Yeah. Now, this is just astonishing. It shows what happens when scientific illiterates get in charge. It shows what happens also when a network of stupidity builds up and has effectively free reign. This, you think, well, it's so silly that creationists keep on talking about these designed objects. It doesn't really affect anything. Oh, it turns out, yes, it does. It gets even weirder. Another one that popped up here, we've got, let me see which one I want to discuss with, which is really more stupider than the other. Let's start with the slightly less stupid. R.R. Reno, who is the editor of First Things, which is a conservative ID purporting, they don't really support creationism, they support intelligent design a lot, though. It's very politically conservative Christian journal. Say no to death's dominion. This editor is just really pissed off at these complaints about people that recommending that they maintain social distancing. And he says, there is a demonic side to the sentimentalism of saving lives at any cost. Satan rules a kingdom in which the ultimate power of death is announced morning, noon, and night, but Satan cannot rule directly. God alone has the power of life and death, and thus Satan can only rule indirectly. He must rely on our fear of death. A little bit farther down. Just so, the mass shutdown of society to fight the spread of COVID-19 creates a perverse, even demonic atmosphere. Governor Cuomo and other officials insist that death's power must rule our actions. Religious leaders have accepted this decree, suspending the proclamation of the gospel and the distribution of the bread of life. They signal by their actions that they, too, accept death's dominions. And a little bit on there, that older generation that endured the Spanish flu, now long gone, was not ill-informed. People in that era were attended by medical professionals who fully understood the spread of disease and methods of quarantine. Unlike us, however, that generation did not want to live under Satan's rule, not even for a season. They insisted that man was made for life, not death. They bowed their head before the storm of disease and endured its punishing blows, but they otherwise stood firm and continued to work, worship, and play, insisting that fear of death would not govern their societies or their lives. Reno, my mom almost died in the Spanish flu.
You know, RJ, I saw a Twitter post today and it said, what percent of the crowd that says abortion is murder is also the everyone get back to work during the coronavirus?
Yeah.
And it's like, probably
the
most
guys
of them.
who they popped up on Sci Strike's video thing, and they haven't shown up lately, but one of them is just a hilarious little fellow. They're from Canada, and they still do their podcast up in Canada. I follow them on Twitter, and they did the most dead on clever bits when they were said Republican Party 2010. There's going to be death panels from Obamacare. They want to kill your grandma.
Oh my God.
Republican Party 2020. Old Granny isn't really contributing much to the economy now, is she?
It's just absolute insanity. I mean, this is literally exactly what the flatten the curve meme is for. Yes, during the Spanish flu, they didn't flatten the curve, which what that does is it, as Mel knows, it overwhelms the medical system.
Bingo.
And loads of people die as a result.
We don't have enough beds.
Look
we
at
don't have
Northern
enough
Italy.
ICUs.
I mean, yeah, we can have that. We can keep everything going as normal, kill off thousands of people and go, oops, and then just get it over with. Or we can avoid people, do social distancing, and fewer people die as a result.
Exactly.
I think.
Now,
can I chime in for one
oh,
second?
absolutely, Mel. Absolutely.
Okay.
Since this is an area that you would have more familiarity with than we.
Yes.
Yeah.
So just really quickly, the thing with overwhelming the hospitals, that's not just people with the virus. If the hospitals are overwhelmed, that means if you get in a car wreck, they'll just get to you when they get a chance.
Where do
if
you go?
Have a stroke, you got a heart attack, you have an accident at your house, you have third-degree burns, it doesn't matter. So any kind of thing that they could normally treat, tough luck.
Tough
Yeah.
notice, tough luck.
You don't want to go into triage.
Yeah, and that's the issue. This is actually building on a systemic problem that hospitals have been doing for years because they're for profit largely. And the fact is that empty beds aren't profitable. So you don't want to have empty beds. So you cut down on your beds. You want to have a just in time where you can handle just the number of people that come through to make a high profitability level, unless you hit a pandemic and suddenly you don't have enough beds for everybody. And suddenly you got to decide whose granny gets to die or not. This is scary stuff. It's about to get worse. You think already what I had, this is another link that just came on here. Trump cabinet Bible teacher blames coronavirus pandemic on God's wrath. Somehow it involves China, gay people, and environmentalists. This is from Ralph Drollinger, a minister who leads a weekly Bible study group for President Donald Trump's cabinet. Let me repeat that. The minister who leads the Bible study group for President Donald Trump's cabinet, attended by Mike Pompeo, Ben Carson, Betsy DeVos, Alex Azar, Mike Pence. Their congressional version of it is involving Kevin McCarthy, John Toon, who's the second-ranking GOP lawmaker in the Senate. You want to feel that maybe people with this kind of mindset being in charge of things scares the shit out of you? Yeah. It does me.
Yeah.
This is absolutely Drollinger's experience, by the way. He was a former college basketball player. And we don't have to worry about them people making decisions for us. Oh, but they are. And so fortunately, we've got governors, Republican and Democrat, who by and large are having their head screwed on. You find people in the state houses, though, there are quite a few people who, by some weird coincidence, tend always to be Republicans, who are saying that this shouldn't be a problem. We shouldn't be worried about that at all. And let's go to have our little prayer meeting. This is just insanity. But my governor here, Inslee, and governors in a variety of the states get kudos, I think, overall for stepping up and trying to do the best they can under a circumstance that got worse because we had scientific ignoramuses and religious ideologues at critical junctures. By the way, one of the person who actually recommended axing the CDC preparedness program was not specifically Donald Trump. It was, drumroll, John Bolton. So there again, you can see bad method isn't some academic trivial subject. It's something that literally is a matter of life and death. And we're experiencing that now. Oh, by the way, I should be getting to shameless plug because we've just, and patron thank you, because we have shot past our midpoint on that. Let me thank again. I recognize full well that an awful lot of people's finances can get scrapped because of all this mess. So I was expecting to get a bunch of little notifications that the Patreon saying, you know, they have to cut away from that. There hasn't been any so far. And I thank you, every single person who has not done that, because I fully understand that there would be a lot of circumstances where they go $10 to that stupid RJ guy. Yeah, we don't really need to worry about that. So not that I'm recommending that anyone do that, but nonetheless, I'm well aware of the fact that I don't want anybody to put me on a higher pedestal than their own safety. Dapper Dino does exactly the same thing when he calls attention when he talks about his Patreon account. He says, no, don't anybody give anything to me unless you have that spare cash to do. So let me thank the people who have in fact helped and continue to do so. Hendril and Eric and Speed of Sound and Zurus and Zeshi and Travis and Convert and Eat and James and History Miner and Ralph and Pologia and Mike and Ian and Duranku and Benjamin and Todes Real and Daniel and Steve Bauman and Marigale and Insects Are Cool and Devin Reeves and Morton and Paul and Puffalophagus and Bo and Staggles and Alex and Paul and the legacy patrons who did have circumstances where they weren't able to help in times past. Jen and Jody and John and Keith and Andrew and Dyer and Yui and Mona and Brad and Daniel and Nyanya and Son and Ugly German Trues and Everett and Sewer. And may I again thank Pologia for the wonderful little blurb he helped put out for our book, which certainly produced an impact.
Yeah. What, you shot from like the 40s in Amazon to 8?
Oh yeah. We're still at number 8 on the new history and science and philosophy books.
So right after you buy Neil Shubin's new book, buy ours.
Yeah, or make a double feature of it, all that kind of thing. Yeah. You'll get a solid work on the thing. And what I'm delighted with is that even in my own apologetics when I'm dealing with people, that because of the work that we compiled on this book, we're ready to hit the ground on so many different topics to where I go, oh, we have a section on that in the book, and we can even tell you the pages on it. And so it's extremely up to date. Like, I haven't seen too many creationists try to bring up the Whopper sands, but they brought up the salt issue in creationist debate still, and we deal with that stuff. If they try to bring up coral reefs or any of this other stuff, excuse me, we got all that. Yeah, we go. We're ahead of you on that.
I think it was Lee Wimberly, the doctor who doesn't science, who said that rock salt can be formed volcanically. Gypsum can result from volcanics, but not rock salt. Calcite is an evaporite.
Yeah. And the thing is that all of that creationist network, that subculture, filters through in a network of stupid, which ends up connecting up with politicians
who are
making decisions for people's lives right now. There are people in Congress. Mark Meadows is a young earth creationist. Just how creation-y Mike Pence White Walker guy is, we don't know, because he's very vague on the subject. Nobody does vague better than Mike Pence. He was notorious for that as governor of Indiana.
Aaron Ra did a video about it way back. So he kind of talks about it a little bit. But RJ, you mentioned that all the things link up. Oh, I'm so excited for you to see the script, the next script. Oh, it's so... Whatever stupid you have in mind, it's worse.
Oh, the Harun, yeah.
Well, okay. Well, it's out there now. But yes. Oh, I'm so excited for you to see it.
Well, I have a pile of the Yaya books stored, because he is like a vomit of apologetics and of websites. He's now, I think, in jail because he was
sex trafficking. Yeah,
because the Turkish government is no bastion of science, but they also don't like hedonistic people who make Islam look bad. And so he got called up on that part. It's ironic, just desserts for the twerp. But anyway, while he was out, in his previous iterations, he basically had a bunch of little slave labor flunkies go through and scavenge together all of these books, which then would be put out free, although he was also selling them. And so it was a weird double standard on that kind of stuff. And they also created a plethora of websites that were acting as basically clickbait. And we know that Kent Hovind built off of some of that, because he was copying Harun Yahya. on some of the bird evolution stuff. So this vast interconnecting network of stupid is reflecting just how many people are out there that you don't necessarily recognize all the connections of stupid unless you start scraping under the surface. And how do you do that? You ask methods questions. When somebody comes up with a claim, where did you get it from? Did you fact check it? Ooh, what website is that? Do we know anything about that website? And so forth and so on. And follow the trail on it. And we should be demanding of our elected officials that they meet minimum standards of reasoning and science knowledge and historical knowledge. It turns out we cannot tolerate as a culture if we do not have a well-educated electorate. And if we don't have elected officials that activate that. So Thomas Jefferson's argument that we need a well-educated electorate for the well-being of the republic is never more true today. We cannot tolerate scientific illiterates because they're going to kill people by their blundering and suggestion of stuff and hunches. Where I see poor Anthony Fauci, a genuine scientist and a genuine hero, in holding his tongue and trying to get as much correct knowledge out there as we can. And the same thing goes for all of the other various experts that are disseminating information and trying to do fact checking. Our local TV channels and that are doing that all the time. Everybody is prudently switched on to another area of doing stuff at home. And that's one advantage we have that we didn't have in 1919 when the pandemic occurred then, is we have social media. So Jackson and Mel and TD Lane and I can literally be in the same virtual room while we are nowhere near each other for any virus to catch. And we can communicate information back and forth, and we can put up links and all of that, and we can contact our loved ones and communicate in Skype and all of that. That was not available to my mother in 1919 when they were slapping mustard plasters on her in the hope that she would survive the flu. And so we have an entirely different dynamic available today, and let's bloody hell use it. So there we got. So we got any other questions floating along down here in the C. Brown popped in and out for just a while. And C. Brown refers to pimping. Oh, that is an area that you do not want to go to. And anytime Lisa wants to have a one-on-one, your game, well, you're an idiot, Brown. And you're, as far as I can tell, you're never going to be anything but surprise us all. Study, learn, write your material out, fact check what you read, conceptualize what your model is, apply it to the data field, earn the place of respect. I think that Jackson and I both indicate that from how we interact with the people that vet our work. I was delighted to find, as Steve Bauman went through our geology chapters, that he didn't have any errors to point out.
That's true.
Great. Yeah, I've really liked the isochron section, and yeah. I've been liking the accelerated dating section thus far.
Yeah, there's such a huge array. The reason why creation science was a daunting subject to tackle, as opposed to the little itty bitty slam dunk on the reptile mammal transition that's much more focused, because it's really dealing with about 20 different primary source advocates, and the technical literature. Even that involved 2,300 bloody sources. But it was a more focused topic. Creation science blunders across everything. It's hard to imagine a field that they don't try to trample into the ground.
Indeed.
We will be getting to the other end of the trampling, the history, the cultural elements, the human evolution issues, and of course more on Tiktaalik and the origin of tetrapods, cosmology, where stars come from, where matter comes from, and all that kind of stuff. There's a pile of material that will be in the probably comparably sized volume 2 that we'll be getting to in fairly shortly. I was in such a hurry to complete this work and to keep ahead of schedule on things that every news source that I was pumping in, including stuff for the new book, just went into the master bibliography, but it never got into the spreadsheet. So I had this thing that ran on page after page after page after page after page of stuff that was not in my spreadsheet account to calculate how it fit into the bigger system. So I've been spending that little time here, going through that. And now I'm now into Frank Sherwin. And so I'm up to the S's, you know,
Wow.
and when that's done, then I can get back to things that need to be done. Plus I've also, at night when I need to relax, and this is a nervous time when it's nice to be able to do that since all the talk shows have gone off. Although Samantha Bee is live, she's back on the air tonight on her program on TBS. They're doing a live show from their various squads, but everybody else, all Colbert and Seth Meyers and
John
the Tonight
Oliver.
Show, everybody else has gone on the stop. So I wanted to have those late nights to laugh and to get kind of energized and to get a little perspective on things. And so the fact that Samantha Bee is finally coming on at 10:30 on TBS, I think I'm recording her 11:30 or 12:30 repeat on that because there's some other stuff going on at the same
Looking
time.
forward to having some more comedy around. But Andy Lord in the chat says, let's just say that the Darwin Awards are going to have a record year for the nominations this year.
Oh yeah, and this is a horrible, tragic irony, which I don't gloat over, but it's something you have to pay attention to. That the demographic that's most likely to suffer the worst from this is a demographic composed largely of older people who glad hand one another in large social gatherings, from sporting events to church gatherings. What demographic does that sound like?
The red hat demographic.
Exactly. This is to some extent a suicidal process that, you know, you want to scream at them, don't do this. We consider your views stupid, but don't do stupid things on top of the stupid things.
They're like ants.
Yeah, there are those that are doing the smart thing, but there are those on both sides that are doing the dumb stuff. And the bluists are going to suffer the most through this, but they're going to make others suffer as well. And
this is a weird time we're going through. It's unprecedented in that you've never had a circumstance in a modern economic frame where such a huge proportion of people have needed to be told, don't go outside, don't go to work, don't do anything. So suddenly all the supply chains and interactions grind to a halt except what you do online. So people can still buy stuff from Amazon, like our book, and they can still do that. But and some little drone will come in and drop it off at your place, and then you'll scamper out and pick it up, and then swab it off with the package off with wipes, and away you go. But nevertheless, you've got the need to be able to deal with people who are going to have to pay bills, who are going to have to, and the people that they would be paying the bills to need to have that money coming in. So you've got utilities and banks and others that all are part of a food chain of things. The Federal Reserve, apparently, if you don't listen to Marketplace,
food web.
Yeah. And if you don't listen to Marketplace on radio or podcast, Kai Risdall, do it, because you get such a skivvy about what real people do in a real economic situation. It's a national treasure to listen to. Follow NPR, watch their programs, the things that are done on your local channels as well, that everybody's trying to do the best they can on this, and there's remarkably good stuff, and try to keep good spirits on things. I'll say everybody that I bumped into when I made quick food run to try to find out, and a lot of the stores have even curtailed hours and things.
We have, we close at 8 now.
But everybody I bumped into has been upbeat. Now, there may be sourpusses and angry people and worried faces, but I haven't bumped into any. And I think most people actually at the grassroots level, regardless of your politics, are decent. They're trying to work their way through this bloody thing. And if we use reason, not stupidity, and listen to people who actually know what they're talking about, as opposed to certain people who don't, who may even be in political power, but you should just put tape over their mouth and shut the F up. We'll get through this.
Tell us what you really think, RJ.
Yeah. Well, it's not that there was just a piece, I didn't put a link up to it, but it was a chilling read. I think I put it up on Facebook, that is from Foreign Affairs, where they say that this is actually the Corvid mess is one of the worst intelligence failures of our history. And he was specific that it was intelligence failures, because it turns out that the people who, the same things where people were not putting warnings. We're putting warnings up, but nobody up above was listening to them. That's what happened before 9/11. Well, it's exactly what happened with this. That you had people in the CDC, even independent from the cutting of the CDC preparedness team because of idiot Bolton. There were preparatory reports where they did modeling of what could happen in the case of a pandemic virus, this specific one, where they were running the numbers as to how many beds and stuff would need. And they tried to interest people upstairs that there was something important. This was like January or February when they were doing this. And it never got past the preliminary report stage. It never filtered upstairs. And this is unconscionable.
Yeah.
Absolutely unconscionable.
Ineffective bureaucracy breaks countries.
And well,
and this leads to disaster.
This is beyond merely bureaucratic hissy fits. This has to do with systemic ignorance. And
I'm talking about systemic degradation of bureaucracy to the point where nothing gets done that isn't with the administration's agenda. And
well, that's surprise, the top down. That's like the Inca. Everything was top down, and the same thing went with Stalinist command states. That you don't do anything unless you figure out whether or not it's politically appropriate and whatever the czar or the Politburo tells you. Those sorts of top-down command system approaches are absolutely disastrous when there is a malfunction at the top. Or in the case of the Inca, when Atahualpa was captured by Pizarro, suddenly there's no one to command. And everything grinds to a halt as everyone's waiting for commands to come down from the Inca. And so, plus they'd already been hit by diseases that had killed probably about a third
good old smallpox.
It spread through. At that stage, it was not being done deliberately. It was just because it was spreading in a population that had absolutely no defense against it. And then you still get people that are dribbling on, like these stupid things about using the wrong kind of stuff that could kill you to attack the virus. No, there's prudent, simple things to do. You just got to follow the procedures.
The people who say if you received a vaccine against like measles, mumps, or rubella, you should be vaccinated, or that means that you're good against the coronavirus. No, it's a new virus. You're not inoculated against it.
Yeah, and what worries me, and in fact what worries epidemiologists, is that there could be a mutant strain of this eventually developing, not necessarily this year, but next year and beyond, in which case we get to go through this happiness again. So we got to be able to prepare to handle sudden surges in pandemics and the ability to tactically curtail those. This is going to have to involve some systemic alterations as to how we handle disaster reliefs. There's going to be stuff at FEMA level and where you stage hospital ships and how you handle emergency hospital constructions and backlog of masks and other things that, there's a lot of stuff that's going to have to be refigured.
The stores are not closing, people. You don't need to hoard toilet paper.
Oh,
the
God,
stores will stay open and you can go get some whenever, like any other day of the year.
I was at the grocery store yesterday because we needed some stuff. One of the things we need is eggs because the eggs we have left are getting old and there's not many of them left.
Mm-hmm.
Costco didn't have any eggs. The grocery store, Stater Brothers, we go to, doesn't have any eggs.
Yeah, what are people planning on doing? Are they planning on freezing the eggs? Are they going to make gigantic omelets?
Meanwhile, the entire meat section's full. Raw meat.
Well, we were cleaned out of
freeze raw meat.
Yeah, we were cleaned out at first, but the meat things are starting to come back for the most part. We're actually not running out of milk and eggs on a daily basis or beef or chicken, but still toilet paper. We get it, and it goes within like 12.
By some happenstance, I had a good supply of going back months and that, so didn't have to worry about that thing. I improvised when I went into try to find some spaghetti, which is the cheap food of choice in there, and you're seeing the empty rows, everything except the gluten-free, the couple little tiny little leftovers of gluten-free things, which apparently people didn't want. But the thing is that I looked around and found, and all the sauces had been stuck up and all that, so it was just absolute crickets. Well, I improvised. because over on the prepared stuff shelf, there was one lonely little box left at Walmart of cornbread stuffing. Just one. So I picked that up because I like cornbread stuffing. And then I saw sticking in a corner where no one had paid any attention to it, there was quite a few of these long summer sausages. They were like $8 for a big long summer sausage. And I thought, I can mix those together. So I took that and a bunch of capers, and I bought an onion later on, and hot mustard that I put in that, and sauteed in olive oil, and make up the stuff, and got some Brussels sprouts frozen, and 4 meals out of that.
Yeah, everyone's getting experimenty.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is kind of forcing us to cook more because prepared stuff doesn't last very long for us. Yeah, had grilled cheese tonight and tomato soup. It was good.
I got enough food to see me through to about 3 weeks into April, if worse comes to worse. So that gives me a little leeway time to see what happens on there. And I hope everybody's doing the same kind of calculations as to what they need to do. Supposedly, some of the relief checks will start showing up in other people. I don't know whether it applies to Social Security people like me at all, so I'm not expecting anything. If something shows up, I'm happy. But for regular people, supposedly middle of April, it sounds like the checks might theoretically start coming to people. Well, what do you do until then? That's the thing that I think a lot of people will be terribly worried about. So there's going to be a bumpy time with a lot of people's finances on here, and that's going to produce stress. You're going to have some people that the families will be climbing up the walls on this kind of thing, and people wondering whether they're going to have a job left over after it. So that's why the unemployment things. And
we've hired a bunch of people at my work because people are getting laid off. So we really didn't. I don't think we really needed more people, but they've hired a bunch, to kind of be, I guess, interim workers.
And Erica Gutsick Gibbon, who suddenly found her plans to go to where was she going to?
I think it was Malaysia, wasn't it?
Malaysia. On a primate research. Suddenly that's pulled the plug on. The Olympics have now been canceled and will be held theoretically next year. So all the plans on that stuff. ESPN are going to be putting candles of doom because all of their sporting events that they would be covering are non-existent now.
Yeah, my parents are nurses and I work as a cashier. So oddly enough,
you're in the well, when I was going up to one of the 24-hour grocery places where I finally found some pasta that was floating around, I bumped in, not physically bumped into, but she was just packing up.
Stay away from people.
Exactly. But anyway, she's a local nurse, and so I gave her a big thumbs up and said, you are one of the people that's keeping things going. And she was giving me some skivvy about what the circumstances were in her experience and that. And so you find out what you can and learn and proceed.
Yeah, I mean, my classes are online now, and I'm not a fan of that. But other than that, things are relatively normal, which is odd for a pandemic.
Yeah.
Online classes, man, I'm not used to those at all. It's not like the normal thing for me.
This may become a much more normal thing. It will probably be an automatic response in future as we get additional pandemics. I'm just amazed it took this long for a pandemic to happen. This is not something that was, oh gosh, you could knock us over with a feather. President Trump may not have the clue on this thing, but everybody in the epidemiological community, I'm sure scientist Mel would agree on that, is that, everyone was just going because how everybody's got this integrated flight system where people are flying all over the place so quickly that everyone has been terrified that some little virus that's benign fairly much in its local environment gets scraped onto somebody's shoe and gets on that plane, and it's in a big hub and spreading like wildfire. The thing that's made coronavirus so insidious is that it doesn't show symptoms easily. So the thing is, when Trump was putting this simply, well, we'll just stop people from coming in. No, it's already in. And
we know it's been exposed to the Senate. We know it's been exposed in the Senate. We know it's been exposed to part of a good chunk of the administration.
Yeah.
It's been exposed to numerous world leaders.
Yeah, Prince Charles has it now.
Even the Russians are finally starting to realize, they've got a little bit of stuff going on because they
the temples now.
Yeah, the viruses don't give a rat's ass for people's politics. They don't care anything at all about what happens on the news. They don't listen to tweets. They don't follow non-disclosure agreements. You can't lawsuit them to death. No, the little virus just does its little thing, and it looks and it doesn't even look. It just takes advantage of the vector. Ooh, a population of stupid people attending church and rubbing shoulders and hugging one another. And there's what happens. What can you do?
That was a sound.
Yeah. Ann Coulter, just another anti-evolutionist, Coulter camp, isolationist, anti-immigrant. She ticks off the culture war. Yeah, I could call her Coulter camp. There we go. Anyway, she got roasted quite rightly. I think Tattoos and Bones was one of those lighting into her. That she put up a chart which supposedly was showing how relatively safe everybody under 60 was. The curve
my God,
had a bunch of little charts that went up like this, but she didn't read the bloody numbers. That it's really bad for people up in the old category, but even the numbers for people in the 20 and 30-year range is an order of magnitude more deadly than the flu.
Yeah, she said it was just like the flu, but no, you fucking read your own
Don't
goddamn
you know
chart,
the difference between 0.1 and 2.0?
Oh.
Yeah, if it's like a logarithmic scale, then they don't realize, oh, it only went up by 1 unit. No, that's going up a whole magnitude. It's going from 0.1 to 1.
A Richter 9 isn't that much worse than a Richter 8.
Yeah, and the fun thing is, if the hospitals get overwhelmed, the death rate increases.
Well, and again, like Mel rightly pointed out, you have a situation where if you get into the car wreck or you have the seizure, you're put on the queue. Okay, Granny, we'll see whether we can deal with you. We'll put you on the little triage list. Welcome to 2020 Trump Trump care.
Yay!
Trump care.
Anyway, well, I think that covers a lot of the material on that stuff. We'll be starting a whole brand new book of stupid starting next week. There's, as usual, we continue to have James Cole dumb and Denise O'Leary dumb, the stupids that keep on giving. Those are going to be in future episodes as well. Dum. And I will again show the wonderful little picture of the rocks for there. This is a book that if anybody asks you, were you there? You can say, the rocks were there.
My pals, the rocks were in fact there.
So Mel, thank you for hosting. You can plug us off. C. Brown can go steep in his juices until next week. And we'll see you all next week, assuming things are as they are.
Bye, everybody.
Awesome. Taking you guys out.
Oh, that was good
RJ, the script. Oh my God, I had so much fun writing the script for the horror and yaya tactic. This is going to be one of the goofiest videos that we've ever made. It's like when we did the video on what was it, the creation.